Advisory Committee, March 14th. This is today that we want to meet. And I call the meeting to order. And welcome everybody. On the agenda, we have approval of minutes, which will take a minute or two. We try to stick to it because if we approve the minutes, we have a base to work from. So you must excuse us for 5 or 10 minutes because there are things in there that are important. Then we did, I did plan to do Article 32, which is now Article 33, I'm seeing 32. We'll get clarity on that, which is the appeal to the ZBA. We will cover that. And I hope that to be quick. And then we'll move on to Article 16, which is recreation, because my perception was that it could be a longer discussion. If we are to, I understand we have the Board of Selectmen are joining us, and I'll try to manage it as best as I can. I just want to go to the minutes of March 14, and I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second, but there's a change in there as amended.
Yes.
There were there was a vote on Article 16 where the vote was 5-3, and I got two people who dissented, Mr. Sensky and Ms. Buds. I will move that we amend the minutes because there was a omission in one of the votes on Article 16. There were three dissenting votes, and I'd noted that Mr. Sensky and Ms. Budd dissented, but I didn't note who the third dissenting vote.
So the vote that you minuted was 5-3 for approval.
Yeah.
What is the 5?
Well, who's the 3 is the question. Jasensky and Budds dissented, but one more did, and I didn't note who it was. Anybody want to confess?
Karen Marguerite was not at the meeting.
So it wasn't you. Sorry, you're not guilty. It was the it was A.
It was DePietri.
DePietri Field, yeah.
Was the 5-3? Was the 3 against,
Yeah.
or was the 3 against?
The three dissented, yeah. It passed 5-3, approved for 5-3, but there were 3. So was the vote really 6-2? Did I miss the count?
I think you did.
So nobody else remembers dissenting there? Okay, I'll change the
I think so.
6
Okay.
to 2. And so with that change, that's the amendment. To the
Can I
minutes.
make another amendment, please? Number 2, where we approved the budgets, I would like to have inserted after the word budgets, which would read, Mr. Peters moved that advisory supported total operating and capital budgets, inclusive of every line item.
Where's that?
Here, as proposed at the recent selectmen's meeting.
Okay. All right. So
I'm
no other
fine.
changes.
Okay. I had a second.
I seconded.
Can we vote? Those who agree to the minutes as amended? Yes? Okay,
And one abstention?
one abstention, she wasn't there. Thank you for your patience with the minutes. Article 32. I want to be very clear about this. We addressed Article 32 at the last meeting. 2 members of the committee were not present. And 2 of us abstained from voting. That means 4 out of the 9 did not vote. The discussion was of such a form that I abstained because I felt that myself, as well as some of the members of the committee, did not have enough background to the subject. I subsequently asked the members of the committee to look at the video of the last meeting of the planning board, where they could see various opinions being put forward, including that of Mr. Sam Stivers, who repeated that at our meeting. And I therefore ask that we call a vote on this again. And I'm sure members of the committee had a look at it, so I am not doing anything else but asking for a vote on this again. And I move that we approve Article 32 as, yes, as amended by the last I distributed to you, which is the draft proposal as was put forward by Mr. Andrew Dennington.
Process question. We already voted on this, so don't we need to vote on whether we want to reconsider first before we vote again on it?
I'm more than, that's more, no problem, we can do it any time. So I call for a vote. I move that we vote to reconsider Article 32.
Second?
Discussion?
Can you remind me who the two that didn't
Ken.
vote on this were?
Adrian.
So Frank, okay.
We have
No, who weren't here besides, it was Karen. That's not the one you called in on?
Yes.
You
Right.
called in?
She was not on the call any
I
longer.
wasn't on the phone at that point.
Okay.
So I called. I had a second. So I call for a vote to support that we revote Article 32. Those in favor?
To revote?
2, 3,
To
4,
To reconsider.
5. Got 5 votes.
Mhm.
Those against?
Three.
3. So we're going to vote.
Abstain?
Yeah, abstention.
Do we have any abstentions?
No.
I got 5 and 3.
5 and 3. 1, 2,
That's
3,
8.
4, 5,
We're missing one.
6.
We have six. It's six.
6.
Okay,
Six.
6 and
It's
6 and 3.
6 and
Okay.
3. So I'm back to move that we support Article 32
Second?
as proposed and amended by Andrew Dennington in what I circulated to everybody, which reads, any person aggrieved by the action of the planning board on a site plan approval application may appeal said action to a court of competent jurisdiction in accordance with Mass General Laws C 40A, $17, I guess it's $1. Section 17. So, do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Those in favor?
Wait,
Yeah,
wait,
let's
wait.
discuss. I have discussion, yeah.
Good.
For those who, the members who weren't here for the conversation on the thing, I continue to believe that this is something that should remain as it is, as it has for the last at least several decades here, in terms of providing an opportunity for the average citizen to appeal a site plan decision by the planning board. And I think, as I've stated at several of the public hearings on this, I'm not at all in disagreement with the statement that people have made that the planning board is the one that has the expertise in terms of site plan and is appropriate to do that work under the bylaws, et cetera. But I also believe, as someone who sat on the zoning board for a number of years and spent a lot of time listening to concerns of abutters, that it's important for people to have an opportunity to get a second opinion or recourse without having to go to court on these things. And I think the existing bylaw, which provides for individuals who are aggrieved by a site plan decision from the planning board to pursue their case with the zoning board locally, is an important option because it can be done with relatively low cost and relatively quick result. You don't have to hire an attorney. You don't have to wait for months or longer for courts to resolve the thing. And it seems to me, again, it's something that while developers also have the right to appeal these kind of things, that for most of these development projects that go through the site plan process, there are abutters that are affected by it. And I think it's important for the little person out there to not have to go out and hire an attorney and make a big deal, to maybe get some relief locally from a board that, again, admittedly may not have the credentials for site plan review that the planning board has. But in my experience on zoning board, there has always been at least one or two contractors, builders, developers on the board who are familiar with the real estate and construction process, who know how to read a site plan and can provide an informed opinion. And I think, again, that it's a real plus if I'm an abutter who's aggrieved by a site plan decision. I'd like to have my case heard by people who actually know the local conditions, so I can go to somebody who knows the neighborhood and knows what's going on in town and is more sensitive to those issues than I think you're likely to find at a court in Boston or Worcester or wherever the judge happens to sit on this particular matter. So I think it's, again, an important option to have available for people, and to take this away, to me, again, is a hardship for the individual citizen who might want to have another hearing on a matter. I also think that it is rarely used, frankly, in the town, but it's important to have it as something that people know is there and can take advantage of if they decide it's an important thing for them. So all in all, I don't think it's been harmful to have in place, and I think it's a good thing to retain, and I don't think people ought to have to go hire a lawyer to get redress of something that they're unhappy about in terms of this process. So that's my view on that.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. You repeated what we had at the last meeting. It was also reflected in the video recording of the planning board meeting. Mr. Dennington, do you want to speak to your amendment, and maybe also for the interest of the members of this committee? I know I did distribute the video, the link to that, but do you mind speaking for yourself?
Andrew Dennington, 10 Carolyn Terrace, and I'm just speaking only on my own personal capacity. I am the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We did have a meeting about this, I want to say last week. We discussed this article with this amendment, and there was no consensus position of the board. So the position of the board was any member of the ZBA is free to speak at town meeting and take whatever position they individually wish to take. There's no ZBA board position on this. The area where I disagree with Mr. Stivers is that there's no harm caused by keeping this in place. I think the two people consistently over the last 2 months or so that have been most strongly in favor of this have been Town Council, Mr. Cipriano, and myself, primarily because I think that we are the two people that have had the most direct experience dealing administratively with how awkward the appeal from the planning board's denial of site plan review in the Park Central case has been, where that appeal goes to the ZBA. That was a rare case where instead of an approval of a site plan with conditions, there was a denial. And I think it's led to a very rancorous situation where I think it generates needless tension between the planning board and our board, that I think sometimes some people like to kind of fan that tension unnecessarily. I also think that if the planning board's position in that case was that they felt that they had legitimate ground to deny the application for site plan approval, that's very rare. In 99% of cases, there's supposed to be an approval of a site plan application with conditions, and I feel like if that's really the planning board's position, that was the correct thing to do, then rather than have their decision kind of filtered through us, the better position is to just have the developer directly appeal that in court. To the point that keeping this in place kind of preserves the opportunity for and a butter to take a quick, cheap, easy appeal from a site plan approval with conditions. So I've been on the ZBA as a alternate and a permanent member for 4 years. I've only seen 2 of these. I've asked Mr. Cipriano if he's seen any others. He says these are the only 2 he's seen, and this provision has been in the bylaw since, I believe, 1984. So we're not familiar with a single case where this has happened. And now it may be that someone will research this and finds 1 or 2 examples, but I think the example that Mr. Stivers is talking about is someone that would have a problem with, the number of parking spots that were allowed or disallowed, or, where trees were planted on a site plan application. I think at a certain point, authority is delegated to a board, and you just have to respect that that board is going to do a good job. I can tell you, going through the other appeal from a site plan application that went to the ZBA, that was the soccer field case, the Faith School soccer field case, because they were resurfacing the soccer field and putting in an artificial turf. It somehow triggered some site plan approval. And a butter took an appeal from that to us, and we worked through that, but it was very time consuming. There were attorneys representing both sides, so it was not an instance of in a butter taking a cheap, easy appeal. And my whole reaction to that, and I think Mr. Cipriano shared that, is what is the standard against which we're supposed to be reviewing the planning board's action? Is it to say that there's some clear error? They did something that was beyond the boundaries of what they legally should be doing, so it should be sent back? Or is it to just, under this bylaw, the ZBA has the power to just completely reopen the whole thing and start going through page by page these site plans and just coming up with their own new decision. In the existing bylaw, it does say that the ZBA shall have the power to grant the same type of permit that the planning board would have if they heard it in the first instance. So I think that's kind of disrespectful to the planning board, and where they've taken the time to review it carefully and come to conditions, like in that case, about what the hours of operation should be for the soccer field. I'm not sure why we should be duplicating all the effort that they did to come with a slightly different decision about what hours of operation there should be. So that's, in a nutshell, the gist of why I support it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Any questions?
I've got a comment that, thank you for doing that, and that was helpful. Mine's more of a procedural comment. The preface for revoting this was that we had 7 people that voted. The fact that 2 people abstained, I'm not sure why that's relevant. They had a chance to vote that night, but they didn't. We've had many votes where we only had 7 people. So why this one got pulled back and no one else did, it worries me. So I just want to remind everybody on this board committee, especially the new people, that we're not here to rubber stamp what the board of selectmen do, what anybody else does. Our job is to basically act as an advisor to the town meeting and give them our best answer as to what we think they should consider and vote on. So we've disagreed many times over the years with the board of selectmen. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a good, vigorous debate about things. But it's my impression that we're doing this vote because we want to go along with the board of selectmen. They're not going to be mad at us if we don't agree with this. There's nothing wrong with going to town meeting and saying this is why we disagree. So when we vote tonight, I don't think anybody should worry about whether we are in sync with the planning board, the ZBA, who didn't take a stand, or the board of selectmen. We've got our own opinion, and we should feel free to exercise it. We don't want to let people think we're doing nothing but making sure that we agree with the board of selectmen, so we go to town meeting with no disagreements whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with a good, healthy debate on both sides of an issue. I'm not sure I'm going to vote on this. I hear what you say. I'm not sure Park Central is a great one to bring up, though, and because so much has gone wrong with that. I'm surprised to hear we've only done this one other time, though. That's news to me. But I just want to make sure everybody understands that we can make our own decision, and if we disagree with the board of selectmen, they're not going to be mad at us. We've got our reasons to do it, and we will go forward.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. I do want to respond. My job as chair of this committee is to make sure that we make informed decisions, and that those decisions are made to the best knowledge that the committee can obtain, all the members. And we had a vote just now where the majority of the committee voted to reconsider the vote. And so I think it is very important that this vote be taken. It's not about procedure. I think it's only about procedure. I think it's taking our responsibility serious and making the best decision, which is going to go to town, and where all the members can vote again. And I cannot see why there should be an objection to reconsider the vote. I can recall at the last meeting, we had the discussion about having another vote at the town meeting, at the town meetings, where a vote could be reconsidered. That's actually in the, it's in the code. And this board strongly felt that there should be the opportunity at the town meetings that a vote could be reconsidered. And so I am following no other procedure. I think we should vote. This thing has been discussed. I expressed my opinion at the last meeting. I'm not going to repeat it. I think everybody heard me then. And I was strongly of the opinion that the members need to make sure they know what they're voting for on this. I was disappointed. The point being is that we need to, I'm going to call for the vote. I think there's been enough discussion of this. We had discussion last time. People thought and looked at this for themselves, and I'm going to call for the vote.
I'd like to comment on Mr.
I have a
Dennington's
question.
statement.
I think Mr. Dennington, you made your statement already. Mr. Dennington made his statement.
I have a comment on what he had to say. So
Okay, if it's short, the answer is yes.
quick comment, if I may. I have a slightly different view, Mr. Dennington, of the disrespect issue. I guess I don't see it as disrespect for someone to disagree with a decision that a board makes. I think everybody has a right to have a different opinion, and an appeal, to me, is not automatic disrespect. I think the citizens have a right, again, to express a different view and to pursue it through whatever the appropriate appeal process is. And reasonable people can disagree reasonably about things and let the process work it out. So,
Mrs. Stivers, I think you made your point. Yes.
I have a question. I was not at the last meeting, but I had done research. I generally do as much research as I can on most things that come before the board. In order to reconsider, there generally has to be new information that comes up from when a topic was first discussed and when a vote is brought up for reconsideration. So if you could please help me understand what the new information is. I understand we just made the vote to reconsider, but help me understand what the new information is that came up between the original vote and this vote.
I think the new information is that members of this committee had a look at the video of the public, of the planning board, and had access to other opinions apart from that of Mr. Stivers and myself. And that is the reason.
But
And everybody voted already, so I would like to move on.
no new information, though.
Oh,
You're
there-
just saying
Let me
people,
ask, why do you think the people are reconsidering their vote?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking. Was there any new information, or are you just thinking that people were allowed to research it more?
I think people had the opportunity to research it more.
Okay, thank you.
Hi,
Yes, sir.
Brian Shea, Board of Selectmen. A couple points. First, our board has not yet taken a position on this article, so we're certainly not here tonight asking you to fall in line with our recommendation. Second point, before being on the Board of Selectmen, I sat on advisory for many years. Particularly at this time of year, it was not uncommon for advisory to reconsider its positions on many articles, particularly budget articles, so this is not an uncommon thing that you're doing tonight, in my opinion. And I heard Mr. Stiver's argument, and while I agree with the argument that he makes, in playing out the full point, though, I don't think that having the ability to appeal to the ZBA solves the problem of a little guy not having to go to court. I think it just transfers that responsibility to another party, and it also transfers it to the planning board. So let's play out a scenario where a site plan is approved and there's a butter who's aggrieved that appeals to the ZBA. And if the ZBA sides with the person who is aggrieved and makes a change, that then creates another little guy, another abutter who is now aggrieved, but it also creates a situation where the planning board itself is aggrieved, and their only recourse is to go to court. So you then have another private party that has to go to court, you have the planning board that has to go to court, you have the ZBA that's going to court, and the town is paying for lawyers for the ZBA and the planning board to argue against each other. I think this article solves the fundamental problem of who has ultimate jurisdiction on a site plan approval. It ought to be the planning board, and I'm going to urge our board tonight to be in support of this article, and I hope advisory is as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. I will be very short on it. Sorry. I will be very short on it. But at the end of the day, passing the buck from one board to another board, where the other board, as Mr. Stivers has said at 2 meetings, there may be 1 or 2 people on the ZBA who have the same skills as what there may be at the planning board, does not justify that board to be in a position to reconsider it. At the end of the day, it's not the responsibility even of the ZBA to take such a strong position where they could be viewed as the final judge instead of the land court. It does resolve at the end of the day somewhere else. That is, I spoke about this last time, and I'm not going to bore everybody with my opinion again. I think everybody on the committee heard it last time. So, all being said, I move that we support. I moved. I had a second, did I?
Second.
Yes. Yeah. In that case, I call for a vote. Those who vote to support Article 32. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 for it. Those against? 4. Passed. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate the patience of the rest of the people who are here to have gone through this process, and so that you can get some appreciation of the activities of at the advisory committee. It's actually very important that you can see what we do. We try to do as best as we can with different opinions. We do have on our agenda Article 16 as well. I do want to say that the other 2 articles, which is 17 and 18, we voted not to support. I know the selectmen are here as well, and I did have the request, and we will hear your argument on Article 16. I think, as chair, I would allow some expansion on the other 2 articles in case there's new information that we should consider, which is part of the story that's going on here tonight, that we may consider if there's new information. And I would not reject that. So we will first look at Article 16, but you need to note our minutes say that we approved both A and B. And as far as 16 is concerned, it's only the track that is to be discussed there. And then, so why don't we take 16 first, and then we can see whether you want to go to 17 and 18.
We'll just do introductions quickly. So Kristen Laval, Chair of Recreation.
Jen Hansen, Vice Chair.
Dorian Ferguson, Director.
Arthur Eddy from Traverse Landscape.
So to your point, there were a few items we hoped to cover today because there would be new information that we haven't discussed in past meetings or questions raised in past meetings that we wanted the opportunity to come back because we did additional research or had additional discussions and wanted to make sure that information was presented. If we go in, so it would, to your point, span into both Articles 17 and 18's Lundblad, not as necessarily that, although I do think we'll have more information prior to town meeting. Article 16, again, as a reminder, those are the repairs to DePietri Field, Calander Field, and the Trotter track. While you have already taken a vote on DePietri and Calander in support, I do think we have some new information on Calander that we would like to share just because there were concerns voiced after the last Board of Selectmen meeting. So we'll address those two this evening and any questions, obviously, on the third. I'm sorry, so we're going to address Calander and Trotter. I'm going to start with Trotter, if that's okay. I think in the Board of Selectmen meeting that we last presented at, I basically did a disservice to providing enough detail on the Trotter track repairs. Being so intimate with the project, I almost took it as a given. I think I made a statement just, oh, look at the track, and really didn't provide sufficient detail. Following that meeting, I heard, that feedback, and that may have actually influenced advisory decisions, and that really looking at the track, it didn't look so bad. So we've done a lot of work since that time, and rather than hear from me this evening, we'd like you to hear from our Eddie, who was with Birchwood, again, the consultant that worked with us. We got some new photos too. Worked with us on the study and the recommendations. So he'll speak to the repairs in more depth than I did. And yeah, so take it away.
Okay. Hi again, I'm Arthur Eddy. I'm with Traverse Landscape Architects, formerly Birchwood Design Group. Same company, just a different name. So we reviewed Trotter Track as part of the master plan, and over the past couple of years, the track was built in 1998 as a new latex surface with an oval surface. The track itself typically lasts 10 years with an overspray, and that can happen for 30 years. So you're not replacing the full track every 10 years. You're doing what's an overspray, which is more latex over top of it. But you can only do that so many times where then it starts to separate and become a surface that'll degrade and fall apart. So you can only do it for over 30 years. This track is 20 years old. It's never had a resurface. What ends up happening is a track surface in latex is a cushion, right? So when you're running, it's giving you some softness in your run so that your legs don't hurt, things like shin splints on a track. So once that surface starts to go away, you get a really hard surface and an uneven surface, and that becomes an unsafe surface. So if you're doing things like sprints, where you're running at a very fast pace and you have uneven surface, it becomes a really unsafe playing surface to the athlete. So that's why Trotter Track came up. As you can see in some of these photos here, the black is typical. This is usually what's called a base spray. So they put down a base layer of rubber, which is black, which is less expensive. That's why they do it. And then coat it with a top layer of rubber. You can see the degradation of the surface here, where you're already seeing the top surface and this surface have a differential. So if you're starting to run on those surfaces, you're really creating a safety hazard. And you're also creating a situation where you're hitting a soft spot, but then your leg is hitting a hard spot. So you're starting to see leg injuries, those types of things that happen back in restitution. So in this instance, this is to peel the surface back and put down a new surface. You obviously already invested in a track previously. It's just to replace that surface within this warrant. And it's not unusual to see that. A track is one of the better community assets when you start to talk about athletics. It's used typically by not only athletes, but people in the community to walk. It creates a great space. We feel like it's a really important asset to the community.
Can you expand on the fact that the high school as well as St. Mark's use the track?
Yeah,
And-
so when we spoke, I misspoke. It's not the high school, but the private schools. Fay School does use the track. And so we, as a Recreation Commission, actually it wasn't the commission, but we have had discussions since. And similar to other commitments we've made, is that there's always been an informal policy, a gentleman's handshake, if you will, with the schools in terms of supporting one another with facilities needs. Right now is a really great example. We can't get on our fields because of 9/11. There's some help that's being provided by the private schools there. So they do use the track, and that's part of that informal agreement. But as part of all of this, we have committed to formalizing those agreements, or our policies across the board, not just this one. So we would look to formalize something with the schools, but something that's equitable and continues to promote the community cooperation between our organizations, but we will formalize a policy around that to make sure it's equitable.
Okay, but I think it's important to note that it's also high school students that run on that track.
No, St. Mark's High School students, just to clarify, not the Algonquin, because they do have their track. So I hope that helps, but would be interested if anybody does still have questions on the need for the repairs.
Sure.
More of an information, not a challenge. You said the track should be resurfaced every 10 years, and we've gone 20 years without resurfacing that?
Yeah, so every 8 to 10 years, you should be doing a resurfacing, which is respraying it over time. Yes, and
Is there a reason we haven't? Why haven't we resurfaced the track for 20 years and let it get into this position?
It was on the school's plan, capital plan to do so.
Mine's on?
Yeah, just speak.
Oh, hers, okay.
So it was on the school's capital plan to do it. They, for whatever reasons, they kept bumping it, so we decided to take it on.
Okay, let's move.
May I add one
Talk
important?
about the future, rather.
Can I add just one important,
Yes.
So as part of our capital plan, which we're submitting to the town administrator, we will have in the future, every 10 years, a cost for spraying added to that capital plan.
I would suggest that, because if he's saying we should be doing this every 10 years in order to maintain that track properly, so we don't get to the point where we're at cement and now we
Right.
have to replace the actual base, which is a lot more expensive.
Right.
I think we need to stay on top of our maintenance, and we need a plan for that, so.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I want to speak as an individual. I'm not sure who else here has been an athlete. I ran. And we today have high school kids who can run a mile faster than I could ever think of running it. And I went to look at the track. And I'm speaking as an athlete and as an individual now. That track needs to be redone. If anybody is going to use it, not to walk on for pleasure. That's my opinion. And from an engineering side, I will not say that I'm really that good an engineer. I stopped being one many years ago. But it's getting to the surface at the bottom as well. And it's exposing the bottom layer. So there are two sides on my side that I'm speaking for this to be redone. Both sides. One's going to be a disaster if we don't do it going forward. It's going to cost a lot more. Also had feedback from one of the coaches of Trottier School that they support, think it should be redone. And so that's just my personal feedback.
Appreciate that.
I have a question. One is that in 10 years, you're going to come back and ask for another $300,000?
No, it's closer to a third of that cost, depending on, again, surfacing goes the way, because it's a latex product, goes the way of oil pricing. So it's typically like a third, somewhere between 80 and 100,000 as a respray, not the full cost of the resurfacing.
In terms of the Fay School using it, how much does the Fay School give us in lieu of taxes?
Yeah, again, that's what I was speaking to before. There's been agreements. The schools have supported each other with recreation, and so we also get a lot of support from them in the use of their facilities. But again, as part of this overall plan, we're committed to formalizing our policies around field usage, as we've talked about before. We will rest these fields, but also about formalizing those agreements, but also trying to keep the spirit of what that agreement has done and fostering, you know, the fact that we are all part of a community. But we want to make sure it's equitable as well, and so that's what we would commit to doing, again, as part of moving forward.
Right, but it's not just rec. The fire department, the police department all serve Fay School, and each year the question comes up of how much they're actually contributing in lieu of taxes, and I don't know the
It's
answer.
$10,000, Judy.
$10,000, and they get the track. My objection, I voted against all of these articles, not because I walk the track and I've coached. We've all had connections with the Recreation Commission. It's that the way that you submitted around the budget was, I think, our basic issue, well, mine. Thus taking us out of the loop, unable to do the kind of figuring that we needed to do to set a good budget number. And to come with all these and then to do what I understand why you did it, break them into separate articles so you didn't get one massive no, and had the opportunity to have each one of them voted on, feels like, again, going around the budget process, which is our obligation. And thus, I'm going to continue to vote no. I'm very supportive of rec, but I'm also supportive of the library, of youth and family services, of many other, the senior center, all of whom need money. And we scrutinized and held them down. We spent so much time talking about 6 or 7, how much youth and family we added to them to fight drug addiction. And we're casually talking about $279,000 for the track and so on. It's not the way to do budgeting in this town.
May I briefly address? And we've talked about it before, but I just want to briefly say we fully appreciate that. We were in a situation where the capital plan didn't exist because we needed the facility study to be complete to come up with a realistic capital plan to know what we had to do and what it would cost to do it. Then we had to take all of this and really pare it down to what was essential. By the time we did that, it was too late to get into the capital budget for this year. But we don't think this is a casual discussion. I mean, there's safety considerations, and we could either sit on this for a year and wait, or we could bring it forward now to start the plan that we are already so far behind in starting to execute. But we have now a capital plan draft to put in with the town administrator. It's not our goal to keep doing this through articles, but we also thought it was critical enough to get started that this year we submitted via an article. And just one last comment, because I smile when you talked about breaking up the article as being perhaps something strategic. We actually did that because we felt it was more fair to the community, that it was 3 separate arguments, and that perhaps if we submitted it as one, because some of these are viewed as so critical, that would actually be viewed as something strategic, that we were trying to get the rest of them through on the heels of those that were critical to, those that some might feel are more critical to do. So when we broke that up, that was actually a decision trying to do something in fairness to the community, to let them look at each of these 3 items individually.
Perhaps you could prioritize them. Not now, but at town meeting.
I'd like to speak to, basically append on what Judy said. We appreciate what you do. Don't want you to think we're trying to, I know you're new to this, and I know you spend a lot of time with this, but there's a little bit more background to add to what Judy said. 3 years ago, a subcommittee of advisory was formed to take a look at whether this town could afford to build the new public safety building that we're about to start construction on. As part of that process, that committee sat down with every department in the town, including Ms. Ferguson, to basically find out what the capital plans were for each department for the next 30 years. We wanted to be able to tell the town that we could afford the building, but we wanted to be able to show them we weren't going to cannibalize other projects. We want everybody to have a chance to say, this is what we think we want. As a result of that process, we ended up basically with 3 potential large projects, including the public safety building. One was that building, the other was a combined community center where the senior center and the community would come together with one building. And the third was a either new or rehabbed library. The total cost of those three buildings, we projected at that point, was about $40 million, which included the contribution by the state to the library. So we put that into a model. In fact, there's a person here who spent a whole lot of time putting that into a model. And concluded from that model, we could afford to build this new building that we are now about to start construction. We went to town meeting. We told the town that we could do that, showed them why. We basically said that we've concluded that, with about a 3.1% increase year over year in their operating budget, we think we can do this, and it fits nicely into the long-term budget. So roll forward. We're 3 years later. We never heard a word about this extensive, so I'm not talking about just what you've got proposed on this year's warrant, right? If this was all there was, I wouldn't be as worried, but we've got a whole lot to come. We've seen what you want to do. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but we didn't know about it 3 years ago. So we're going to spend $27 million on this building, so 27 of the 40 has been spent. So we've got $13 million left in our model to spend on new stuff. Well, if you look at your proposals that you guys are considering, there it all goes. So that's number one. Number two, the track record of the rec projects the last couple of years is not good. And again, I know we've told you this, you weren't there, you're not part of this, you weren't responsible. But if we ended up with the same problem with these next projects that we had the last three, the lights, right? The field, yep, and the park, we're really going to have a problem. So we've got to make sure that if we support this, that we know we've got good numbers. Okay, so that's kind of number two. But my suggestion is we should hold off on all this until the summer, till we really can have a chance to look at everything that you want to do and try to fit into a long-term plan. We told the town we expected, budget increase of 3%. This first year, we started off with an almost 8 or 9% increase in real estate taxes. That's what the first shot at the budget was this year. And I think it's going to keep happening. We're going to have a whole lot of pressure because this town is not growing. We don't have enough room to grow. So all of the increase is going to have to come on the tax levy. So we've got a whole lot of work to do. And if you really want to get your whole plan looked at and hopefully fit in, we really need more time to look at. So that's what my problem is. We didn't have time to do it, and it's kind of hard to piecemeal it like you're asking us to do. So that's why I can't support it, because this is just a start to a really big number. And if we say yes to this, does that mean we've said yes to kind of everything else? We do this, then we've got to keep going. So I just wish we had more time. I wish we had the next summer to look at, so we could then be ready for next town meeting to really say, this is how it all fits together.
May I?
Thank you. I do want to, if it's possible, keep the meeting to order, that we discuss the specific article at this point in time. I think the message came across that, next time, better procedure. But
I disagree with what you said. To approve this, you have to understand the big picture, so we have to talk about this. We can't ignore everything else that's about to come. So this is part of trying to approve this article, is to understand all this.
I understand that we've already approved 2 of the fields. So we did that, that's already done. So as far as the specific article is concerned, there was an A and a B and a C. B has been approved and C has been approved. We approved A and B. And so we're looking at specifically the track, which I would like to put behind us. Any other comments?
I have a question still.
Okay, just let him go a little bit.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I am fully supportive of fixing the track. It's not one of those things that we can fix a couple years from now. It's just going to get worse and worse, and I'm worried about the track becoming a very big expense at some point. So it's something that has to be done. Full disclosure, my son runs cross-country for Trotter, and those events are pretty well attended. There's a lot of kids running on this track all the time. And I never really looked at the track until you came before us before, and then I went down and walked it a week ago or 2 weeks ago and really looked at it, and I was shocked. I was actually shocked. I mean, those photos, it's not just one area like that photo, it's all around the track. I was really surprised at the condition of it. It looks like it's abandoned, almost. So I'm fully supportive of getting the track fixed.
Just as chair, I would like to keep the focus on this specific article. We're already 2/3 of the way through the specific article. I take note, and I think the committee members are totally, have what they say is correct. Looking at the bigger picture of everything else that you have in your plans, what I am aware of, and I attended some of your meetings, we're talking about large figures. But I think that is a major exercise to be undertaken. I don't think we're going to be able to do that tonight. So if we could focus, and I'm just asking the committee, I'm asking, I'm not telling you, I'm asking that we try and focus on the track as a specific item. And in this case, I think procedure or plans, I think we need to consider a very important piece, which is education, which is for the children of this town. Sports is a very important part of their education. And and I would like us to focus on the track, if that's okay.
I have a question about the track.
Sure.
I actually have used the track a fair amount over the years, and I actually have great appreciation for its value as an asset to the town and the various recreation facilities. I think it's important to comment on the conversation at advisory previously on this, I think was less focused on the need for the repair. I don't think anybody argues very strongly that we don't need to repair it, but I think the real question is related to some of the previous comments here in terms of timing, and that we have struggled mightily to get the overall budget cost down to what we think is a reasonable number. We've actually pushed hard on a number of departments in various places. We've pushed on deferring capital expenses that are arguably important things relative to safety, as well as this particular issue of safety. And my question is, if we actually don't do this repair this year, but if we do it next year in the budget, is there a significant cost difference between this year and next year, or is it simply incremental decay a little bit in terms of the surface, and we wind up, if we do it a year later, with essentially the same product for essentially the same price, X an inflationary cost impact?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, the surfacing below is going to degrade. I can't predict that that's going to happen in the next year.
Okay.
Because there is still surfacing on that surface, but as it degrades and as it gets to the asphalt, UV weather will start to break down that asphalt. Once you have to start to replace the asphalt, that's your next big cost.
Expenditure. Okay.
Right. And track surfacing stays relatively stable to some extent. The biggest things that we see is differential in materials, as whether it's polyurethane or latex. Those two prices go up and down, but they're relatively stable. I can't speak to whether that will degrade over.
So
the potential's there,
it's
but
not abundantly clear that delaying a year will have a significant impact on cost at this point, at least. Could happen, but
there could be weather issues. I mean, I guess currently it's getting down to the surface, and there's areas where the surface is exposed. So that there is the potential. The potential is every year you wait, the potential gets greater.
Okay. And again, from my own view of this, I think it's a big ask in terms of these numbers relative to what we're trying to do with the overall budget. And I think that I and other advisory members supported the DePietri and calendar things as high priority items, and I think there's less of an argument, at least in my view, that you delay those as much as this one has more potential for the same kind of deferral that we've been pushing others to do and others have agreed to in terms of both repairs as well as capital equipment that are arguably important for the town. So I'm, I guess, still leaning toward trying to defer for a year and working it into the FY20 budget here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Bonnie?
Bonnie, that's okay. Bonnie Faniff. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, but I'm speaking for myself this evening. I think this is a practical resource for the whole town. As a senior and as someone that has taken care of handicapped people, people that have been in stages of rehab, that is the only flat surface offered to someone my age and somebody younger. This is a municipal facility. I'm not sure, but it might have been built with school building funds originally, so it probably didn't cost us very much to start with. And the second thing, if we're talking about a capital plan, and for someone that used to be on the advisory board, and I was on the school committee, I'd be curious if it ever showed up on a capital plan since it was installed. So, some of the questions are warranted, but I think we need to look back on all of ourselves to see if it ever appeared in a capital plan over the last 12 years.
Thank you, Bonnie. Ravi?
As someone who suffered from shin splints, I do appreciate a good running surface. My question has to do with the safety aspect of it. What would happen if, is it like a regular inspection process for, if something were to seriously break down in the next year or 2 years or 3 years, how would you shut the track down? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the bigger concern is when the surface starts to peel and creates trip hazards, those types of things, which you're starting to see in some of those areas. Typically, those tracks would be shut down from a safety standpoint.
But is there a regular inspection? How does that work? I'm curious as to like who does the recreation do the inspection or the school? How does that work? Like who would judge
Who
that?
owns?
Yeah, who would look at it regularly and figure out?
It typically comes down the responsibility on the school because it's on school property, but there's usually, you know, conversation. I've been in conversation with the schools over the last 5 years about this, and the facilities director there, you know, did have it on his plan, but like I said, it never got done. So recreation uses that track quite a bit. The track and field and the cross-country program you talk about is through recreation. So we talked with the schools and we said it's important to us because of our programs and the safety for the kids, so we'd really like to move forward with this, and they supported that. But it really comes down to the school because it's on their property, but we do have conversations about all the shared properties.
Okay, so just to understand, the school would conduct regular inspections and
Yeah.
say this track is no longer safe to
Right.
be used.
Right.
Okay.
Or
thank
user
you.
groups.
Thank you.
And user groups.
If user
yeah.
groups reported it to the rec commission, we need to look at that as well.
I see. Thanks.
I mean, can behind Ravi's question is, has there been such a decision?
Close it?
Yeah, that it is not safe?
No.
Thank you.
So
I guess we'll give the selectmen some priority here because very glad you joined our meeting. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Lisa Brascio, Board of Selectmen. Just a quick question. I know there's been a lot of talk about the capital plan tonight, and I'd like to know, I know you've mentioned that you're going to be coming forward to the town administrator with the capital plan. When will that be available? Just so I think it's important that everyone has a clear idea as to what the forthcoming needs will be as well.
So for those that can't see, Doreen's flashing it, so it really does exist.
Oh, I don't doubt it exists.
No, no,
I would just like to
it's-
see it, that's all.
The plan was end of March. It will be sent, if not already, in draft format. We are constantly making changes to it, but I will quickly say, it's a challenging situation to say we want to sit down here and understand the full plan, because what we're doing in this first phase is taking a step with design costs to help us understand and validate that full plan further so we can have a good conversation about it. When we get to this article, I know we're not talking about it right now, but if we do get to Article 17, a very good example came up in our public forum of the type of questions or concerns from our citizens that might influence those bigger ticket items. So we don't have all the information we want to fully validate and vet out that capital plan, hence why some of our articles are asking, and in 16, for those design costs, so we can take the first step, that incremental step, and understand more the ask that we would go forward with, the options the town needs to consider, and do this in partnership with the town. Not just slap down a price tag and say this is what it's going to be. No, give us the money to start the process, the design costs, the permitting. We'll get a much more clear picture. We'll continue to build out. We're putting in projections in the capital plan, but this will help us refine it and let the town have more of a voice in that process when we're making critical decisions that will impact the cost.
Agreed, and I think it's important that the town is aware, and I understand their projections,
Yeah.
obviously, but it gives the taxpayer, and I've had a lot of questions about this, and I'm sure you've had it at your forums as well, it just gives the taxpayers a better idea, full disclosure, transparent of what, what is potentially coming down the road in the pipeline, so they can make an informed decision. And I'm sure you'll be asked this question at town meeting as well, so it's good to know, and it's great that you've taken this step, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Kristen, do you know you've got the cost nailed on this? This will cover it?
For the projects we put forward, yes, and we built in, to your point about projects in the past, contingency, we've done the opinion of probable cost, we've added in additional contingency, we will have project management. We're taking multiple steps to avoid anything that's happened in the past. And we will not proceed forward with any project that, if design costs come back, exceeds what we've asked for.
And the contingency is how much, percentage-wise?
It's a very conservative contingency of 30%, largely in response to the feedback that we've gotten on past projects.
That's a very large contingency, so you understand that, I mean, that's a really large contingency. We've got 10% of the big building we're about to
Yep.
build. So we don't want to spend the contingency unless you have to, so it's not that you've really got
It's
the
not
money
a
to
slush
spend. You
fund.
really should try real hard not to spend the contingency too.
100% our goal would be to return that to the town.
I cannot help, you'll get me going about capital planning. We tried to do it this year. I was driving it. We did not get to the end goal. But the plan, at least as far as I'm concerned, would be a capital plan that we, for 10 years, other towns do it, that reflects to the town meeting all capital plans, where there would be recreation, library, there would be the transfer station. We would have everything in there so that there's transparency to the town on the priorities that need to be taken, which is not the case here. So I wanted to just, you'll get me going on it, so I wanted to express at least my opinion very strongly about that. If I were to have anything to say about it, we try to. I think Mr. Purple can attest to that. We didn't get all the way, but that should be the case, and yours should be incorporated in there over the timelines. I do want to reflect on one point, is I do not understand how you can have feasibility and design in one sentence. A feasibility study is done before you do a design. So if we agree to funds, you agree to a feasibility study, and if the feasibility study is positive, then you can have a design. I can't see how you can have feasibility and design. It should be split up into two figures so that there's an agreement that there's an agreement for a feasibility study. And in case that is positive, that it could be a design study. Please, it's just a comment on that. Anybody else? Yes, please, Frank.
If I may, I heard Ms. Ferguson mention user groups, which is usually followed by user fees. And I see affirmative, not head shake there, which makes me think revolving fund, which makes me want to better understand the use of revolving funds for maintenance of these sorts of facilities.
Okay, so the user fees that we collect, rental fees for all the recreational properties, those funds go into the general fund, and it helps offset the cost that DPW maintains on our fields. So the contract's over $100,000 to maintain the fields. We bring in about $50,000, somewhere around there, each year from these fees. So we don't keep that money in revolving at all.
Can I ask you to refresh my memory on some of the revolving fund transfers that have been made for new projects or larger projects?
So the Choate Lights project, the commission voted to use some revolving funds for the
Roughly-
project.
Roughly how much?
150,000, I believe. And then for the playground renovation, there was revolving funds transferred from there as well, because we have programs we run over there. We felt it was important that we can contribute to that.
Roughly how much was that?
I think it was about 170,000, I think.
Okay.
But it was over 100,000.
And the lights at Mooney?
That's through CPC, Community Preservation.
And the lights for the tennis courts?
Same.
Same, okay.
Mhm.
And could the roughly, what is it, 320 for the playground and for the Choate Lights? Could that have been applied to the maintenance of either the fields and/or
It can
the
now.
track?
It can now. They did change the law, which we'll be voting on at town meeting.
Okay.
So they just changed that, yeah. So we could use it for some things like that. We already contribute to the school's gym floors when those are being done. We contribute to that because we use those gym floors or gyms for our programs. You know, we do contribute to some things like portalettes and things like that through the revolving fund. So it's not, we don't just keep it just for.
So it's not a unique thought, but I'd encourage the commission to consider prioritizing maintenance over adding features. Not that the features aren't important.
Right.
But adding to the asset base that we need to maintain is, to me, a lower priority than maintaining what we have. And when I hear we have a 10-year asset that requires, or a 30-year asset that requires maintenance every 10 years, and we're 20 years in and we haven't done anything with it, and it's costing us 3x what it would have if 10 years ago we had spent the roughly 90.
Well, the commission can certainly take a look at that. And
Okay.
yeah, and I think, you know, now that we're starting to get into our capital plan and develop it, you know, things like that, they will definitely look at. Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to add, again, this is all new information that we learned from this facility study. I mean, this is invaluable, and it's been invaluable in understanding what it is we need to do so we can course correct.
And I appreciate all of the effort, and I know it's been a tremendous undertaking. Can I ask, when was the roughly 280 identified? How many years ago was that?
It was
The study was.
280 for the Trotter resurfacing
was in like November, December
of 17.
of 17.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
I mean, again, part of this was to not just look at, is to get back on track, is what we've been talking about, is there's a lot of things to do, but to also get to a point where you're not in this position of a large ask and get into the position of a more maintainable process.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I appreciated the timeline there. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to go back to the track. Is there one area that's more worn down than any other area on that track? Is that the area where the kids come in from the school through the gate? So that section is really worn down almost to the cement or the asphalt part?
So I think part of the challenge is like this shot of the track, the darker color, that's all wear. It's like that all the way around the track.
But isn't it, I went over to it, isn't it more worn out where the kids come in and go out?
Yeah.
Is there any way, without hurting the track itself when you resurface it, to make it thicker there to help with the wear and tear in that area?
No,
or
one
not?
of the challenges is it's a little bit of a maintenance program, is really when those areas are coming, what really is doing the damage is kids walking across cleats, playing inside the field. So to provide a surface to get across that surface without damaging it from cleats. So when kids in soccer cleats walk across, you see high wear areas.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, as far as Article 16 is concerned, if we don't have anything more there, I would like to close out on Article 16, one way or the other. If there's no more discussion, I'm going to move that we vote to support Article 16.
Is this Part C?
Especially Part C, which is the field, the track field, yes.
Or we're just doing Part C, we voted on
Just Part C, exactly, yeah.
We keep saying we voted for, but why does it say at town meeting on the article itself?
It's wrong in the thing.
Yeah, it's wrong there, it'll get fixed. Yep, that'll get corrected. So so I have a second, so.
Second.
So, point of order, I was not at the last meeting, so can you just explain to me how this one warrant article has been broken up?
The warrant article came to us broken up into 3 pieces, which is
Well,
what,
it's not 3 pieces, there's 3 components of one warrant article. So
Correct.
are we voting on the warrant article? And
We are
if not, let me ask my question, please. If not, why are we voting on individual pieces?
we are only voting on one piece, which is the Trotter, which is the field, the track, which is the track.
Okay,
Which is number C.
Okay, but that's only part of this entire warrant article.
Correct.
So as the advisory committee, we would need to be making a recommendation to town meeting on the entire article, correct? So I'm confused as to why we're giving decisions on, and everyone else may understand this, I don't, so why we're voting on individual pieces.
Mr. Purple, can you comment on that, please? Mrs. Marguerite wants a very clear answer, so you better help.
And this is the one you decided to give to me, right?
Yes.
So first of all, with item B, I don't recall that you had taken a vote on that. So if it's listed in, as at town meeting in the warrant, that can easily be corrected, obviously, on the floor. Advisory has voted on the article in total. However, you didn't agree as a committee or to vote on everything the same. So I don't understand that it hasn't been voted on.
Will these be presented separately at town meeting, or is there one vote on article?
Well, no, I believe the article is being presented as Article 16. However, advisory has chosen to break it up into pieces. Now, I think that there's a motion to vote for Article 16 in total, which may correct this now.
So, Mark, you just said advisory has voted on Article 16.
Yes.
Okay, do you know which way the committee voted, and are we doing another vote now?
I don't think we voted as a whole on Article 16.
You didn't vote as a whole on Article 16, but so you didn't, my point is you have voted on 16, however, you voted on each, there are 3 pieces in 16, and the committee didn't feel that it could support or not support the article in total at that point.
Okay, so, but those individual votes, and again, I'm just trying to understand, are essentially irrelevant as the article stands right now, because unless it's amended at town meeting, the article, Kristen, help me if, the article stands as a whole, correct?
No, I think the votes taken by the committee at this point are still very relevant. However, the vote that is on the table to support 16 as a whole may make them irrelevant.
But that's not on the table.
I understood that the vote on the table right now
I thought that's what you were starting to try to do.
Is just a part of it.
I will give the honor to...
I'll defer the floor to Mr. Butler.
Yes. I thought
Thank
it
you,
might
John
be-
Butler, 4 Davis Road. I mean, I could just try to lend a hand here. Your choices as a committee, if you wanted to support only A and B, the proper way to do that would be to move to amend the whole and say we move to strike C and propose a total that's the sum of A and B. Secondarily, less effectively, you could support a total of the sum of A and B and leave it to the discretion of the executive part of government as to how to spend the money. But if you specifically only support A and B, the proper way is to move on town meeting, after the motion is made, move to strike C and recommend a total for that amount and see if your motion passes at town meeting.
So, John, that's my point exactly. Has any of that been done? Because votes have been...
I just was trying to assist on procedurally.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like none of that has been done.
We de facto broke it down into 3 pieces with 3 specific amounts to it, and Mr. Butler is totally correct. I just wanted to give the town administrator who's helping and there's a chance. So we would amend it to be broken down into an A, B, and C. And depending on how we vote on C, if we vote tonight on the C piece and we approve it, then the whole article is approved and we don't have to break it down. However, if we do not approve the track, then we will break it down into A, B, and C as at the town meeting and amend it. Thank you. I think, Mr. Butler, did I say that correct?
No, so nothing's been done procedurally correct, but I understand what you have done. I just wanted to understand.
So one thing we could do, because 30% is too much of a contingency on anything. You shouldn't have to put that big of a contingency in here. And I understand why they did it because of the past, but, you know, you go from one extreme to the other. So we could look at the number and pick a different number than 744 that doesn't have 30% built in there, and basically say we approve, you know, $600,000, and you guys decide how you want to spend it on the three choices here.
The design cost, just to clarify, does not have 30% contingency. The design cost has 10%, which is the industry standard for
So
near.
A, B, and C have 30% in it?
I think it was between 25 and 30%.
All three?
A and B are the first two
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
fields.
speaking, sorry.
The fields, A and B, have 30%
Yes, sorry
contingency on
about that.
them.
I was
And
jumping
the
articles
track-
on you.
The track is does not have 30%.
That's correct.
That was a separate quote coming out of.
That's
from
right.
a different lane.
From the company that we used for the tennis
17
courts.
and 18,
Have a 10% contingency
Correct.
because their design costs, which are traditionally 10%.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Sorry.
And there was,
Do you want to comment and basically try to answer
Yep.
Mrs. Cook's point?
No, at this point, we've talked about it, and we've left the 30% contingency, and again, with the commitment that if not used, but we want to get through design, and we want to get through design quickly to make sure that there's nothing unplanned for. And I think a very good example of that, and we haven't touched on it, and I don't want to until we get past Trotter Track, is some of the questions on Calander Field, where perhaps, you know, as more design work gets done on those drainage issues, that 30% could prove to be useful. And we can speak to that in a little bit more detail once we get past the track, because I know it was a question from advisory post our last Board of Selectmen meeting. So at this point, we have discussed it. We did weigh the pros and cons, and we feel that we'd prefer to stick with the 30%. And then, obviously, our goal would be to return as much of that as possible to the town and not use it for additionals above and beyond what we've already scoped out.
Thank you. I think we've discussed this far beyond the borders of just the specific article. So as far as Article 16 is concerned, we de facto broke it down into three pieces. We voted to support A and B, which is the Petrie and Calander. So this is the track. And so I move that we support, and it has been second, yeah, we've had so much discussion, I mean, you know, it's out of my head already.
It says we didn't vote Calander.
And we didn't vote
We
Calander, because
did,
that's.
we have it in the minutes.
It says right here we didn't vote.
Okay, but
I'm
these in
telling
the minutes, we approved it.
That's the one that.
Okay, so can we get to order here and vote? Those supporting Article 16C, which is the track. Those for it, those who support it, please vote. Yes?
Don't we need to reconsider first? A motion to reconsider? Yeah, probably.
Motion to reconsider. That's probably right. Yes. Procedurally, we vote to reconsider. I move it, we vote to I move that we reconsider Article 16C. Second?
The prior vote on 16C.
Whatever the wording is fine by me.
151, Mr. Morse was in favor, Mr. Peters abstained. Prior vote was 1 in favor, Mr. Peters, 5 against, and 1 abstention. Excuse me, Mr. Morse was in favor, Mr. Peters abstained.
So, those to reconsider. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Against?
8.
reconsider, if we approve before, and we're reconsidering.
We reconsidering C.
Only talking C,
Only C.
just the track.
Only C.
It's unanimous.
Okay, who voted against it? Anybody against it? Nobody. So, you have it unanimous. Well, move again. We move to approve Article 16C, which is the track.
Second.
Orion seconds again, okay.
Those in favor of, those who support. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, doesn't carry. Okay, on the agenda, we did not have the other articles.
Mhm.
I would ask if you could make it short and to the point to see whether,
Mhm.
whether that is, we'll decide whether we want to reconsider it or not.
Well, because Calander was already voted on, I think that was just more informational, just to give you an update on discussions since, so maybe I'll hold off on that. And on the turf, again, we've discussed the likelihood of a reconsideration, but I just wanted to share informational that at the public forum that we had last week, what was emphasized more, I think, in that discussion than it was in other discussions was the safety of turf. And I just wanted to share because I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation, and folks, I thought it was somewhat influential to people's thinking. First of all, right now, what we're going through in the town, between the snow and the rain, there's no sports starting, there's no adult league starting, there's no youth sports league starting. I mean, it's chaos right now. If anybody has ever coached to know what's happening with people trying to reschedule games. We have no idea when we're going to be able to start rescheduling. We're trying to split time in the gym. I practiced with 3 other teams in Finn Gym the other day. So this is the impact of not having artificial turf. And we're feeling it right now. And once we have 9/11 back up, that will help, but the second turf would help immensely and the drainage, all the projects we have for drainage. So I just want to mention that because what we're going through right now is exactly part of the drive of what we're going through for turf. Again, what I just wanted to share with folks is that in the last forum, safety was discussed at length, and folks whose main concern was not really the need for the turf, was just more around recent or articles over the last several years on the material. And what we haven't talked about in depth in the past is the fact that, again, why we're going for design costs initially is to allow that time to dig deeper into our options for a turf field material, infill material being a big one. So folks are concerned about the tires being used. And while there's plenty of reports out there, and within our public safety forum, we have some sites mentioned, the EPA and MassGov, who have produced their own studies and saying that there's nothing conclusive that these materials are actually dangerous. The folks at the forum said, well, but that's because in a lot of cases the studies aren't done. And so they felt that perhaps there's more to come. And that's where I think we again, educated them that we've actually spent a lot of time. We laugh, but Birchwood came in with different vials, and we all felt and learned about all the different infills that you can get into a field. And that's exactly what we're trying to get with this design cost, to take that next step, to educate the community on the options. And if anyone has questions on them, feel free and ask Art. That's why we need to take this first step, so we can make sure that we explore all those options and get a total cost, because obviously some of those more environmental, or I don't know how you would characterize them, but the landfills, the infills that aren't tire might come with a cost. So just to give more insight in why we're taking this first step of just the design cost, because that's a very good example of exactly the type of decision we want to make and make with the community. The only other thing I'll add to that is safety was also raised at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And again, if you go online, there's plenty of studies that show injury, people have done studies of injury rates on turf versus grass. I think they're personally very convincing that turf is in fact safe from a concussion and injury standpoint. And Art's offered to provide us some of the more, respectable. We haven't published any links because I'm not sure which would be, it's one thing when I have MassGov and the EPA, we feel okay putting those out there, but which studies should we put out? And so Art's going to provide that to us. So again, I don't know if that will influence the thinking of the advisory board, but it is new information, and it was of particular interest to the public in the forum, so we wanted to share it tonight. Anything you would add?
As the author of the master plan, I think one of the things that needs to be considered is this component was one of those critical pieces to fixing all the other problems. So resting fields, as we talk to your maintenance, they can't rest fields because they're getting used so much. This was one of those critical pieces to kind of resolve a lot of those issues, and that's why it got pushed forward. as part of this piece, because it was kind of resolving a lot of issues that you could start to now maintain all your other fields at a more reasonable rate. You can do it in-house. You're doing it in-house now. The challenge is not having enough time. And that's what this report says, and that's basically why this was pushed forward.
That's Article 17.
That is Article 17, the Neary turf, yep.
As chair, in principle, we voted not to support this. I can only ask the committee whether they're willing to reconsider the vote. And so that would be my question to the committee. So somebody want to move?
I make a motion to reconsider.
Second? Those who support that we reconsider the vote.
The reason is I was not able to vote before, so I'd like to vote.
Okay. I'm against reconsidering it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Well, we
I
appreciate-
will make a comment on that. I think we had some pretty open discussions about it. With the drastic cuts that there were to all other capital projects, I think supporting what has to be done and what we considered, I think is a positive reflection to some of the work you did. There are many other projects that were taken totally off, totally off. It is not only our decision, the town will vote on it.
Right.
But for us as the Finance Committee advisory, we just cannot, and I'm sure I speak for the committee, because that was our consensus. We cannot support that kind of expenditure this year. And if the town votes for it, they will increase the tax rate. That's their prerogative. So you can, but from us, I'm sure I'm speaking for the committee, that you can clearly see we're not willing to reconsider it.
I appreciate that. And for just, because I believe this is being filmed, I would just ask, there is information on the tax rate impact for each of these projects on our materials on the recreation page. So I do encourage folks to go out there and take a look at that. It is broken down by article, so you can see exactly what it is that we're asking for in terms of tax impact, and we'll talk about it as well at the Wednesday forum at the library at 7 o'clock.
Question. Who verified those figures?
The town accountant.
Has Mr. Purple tested to that as well?
He was on the communications.
Brian emailed him to us.
Okay, if Brian did, that's fine.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there's clarity and that we're on the same page. I understand.
For what it's worth, I supported Article 17. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to give you my vote.
We appreciate that.
Okay, do you want
7
to?
o'clock.
Okay, do you want to move on to 18?
Yeah, actually, we didn't have anything new on 18. The last point was not for anything that the advisory would have to vote on. It was more just because it was a concern raised and a question raised, we thought if folks were interested in an update on just Calander and the drainage, certainly we don't need to take meeting time if.
I would like that information.
Yeah.
What's the status on that? Because we had some conversation about it.
Yeah, it is important, and the good news is that, I mean, again, sorry, I'm just trying to find, give me a second. So, bear with me here. Here we go. So in short, for those that might not know the backstory, because some of these discussions just took place after the meeting, but, we've known drainage was an issue at Calander. And there was some pictures that I'm sure a lot of folks have seen after a particularly hard rainfall with, what that drainage issue looks like coming down from the hill, from Carriage Hill, the Carriage Hill development up above. I won't try to go into detail, I'll let Art take the lead there, but in short, drainage was included in our master study. There are costs incorporated to address some hillside erosion and the installation of additional drainage, reestablishment of swales. I'm going to stop there. He can speak to the rest. We have the contingency, which we spoke again, in case there's more, which again, Art will speak to, that we would need to address to resolve those issues. And then again, I'll just reiterate that with all projects, you know, we will, after design, if we find that there's more there that would need to be addressed and we don't have that approved funding and what you've already supported, then we would cease and we would stop the work and then we'd come back and readdress the actual needs. Art, I don't know if you'd add anything from your...
Yeah, I visited the site, and I know Karen and DPW did visit the site as well. There is some failing drainage that's there now. Kind of relatively easy repairs. There's some pipes that have filled, so they're not operating, so that some of that water is moving down faster through those. So we feel like there are opportunities to do some of those repairs. We did carry a larger contingency and had that discussion because as we get into it, how far we have to go, we want to make sure that there's not, we're taking extra money to do that. There are some establishment things like reestablishing swales, stuff that is typical maintenance over time. And it's time to just kind of reestablish those. So we feel like that money was in there for that project to happen.
There was conversation at the advisory discussion of this that there were apparently some design deficiencies or construction deficiencies that caused the problem, and there apparently had been efforts previously to try to get the developer of the project to do some of those repairs. Is that still ongoing? Is that likely? Do we know what the status of that is?
That's not 100% what happened. So as we saw the swales coming down and the erosion happening, we did go and talk to Carriage Hill, so it wasn't really the developer. The planning board did accept the plan. We've talked to town council about this. Our consultants, we did peer review, everything based back when that was developed, it met all the standards, so everything was fine. What is happening is that, besides the fact that we do get some extra, the storms sort of do come heavy and hard once in a while, and that did create some of the erosion. So originally it was supposed to come out of Carriage Hill and kind of wash across everything, but it really ended up coming into like a stream. And so that's really what we're trying to deal with. And there's really nobody to go back to fix that. Because we don't have evidence that anything was done incorrectly, actually. So one of the things that, the only way to really fix that, or that will ever get fixed, is if the field is done, because we have a lot of other drainage projects that are in the queue that affect the roadway and the right-of-way. Our main concern is not a slope going to a field.
So Karen, you're not here for no, so we're giving you a chance at least. So what is the bottom line of what you're saying? So is the bottom line that it'll be taken care of?
Yes.
Or not?
Yes, it will be, but there's no one to go back on, which is what the
Okay,
question
and
was.
who's going to take care of it?
It will only ever be done as part of that, as if the field is done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not gunning for you, really, I'm not.
I don't think that, don't worry.
Okay, so the drainage has been an issue since they built Carriage Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And there were three main, I had already talked to Karen about this, so there were three main streams of water coming down that hill, and you did fix two. There's one that is remaining, correct? That has not been repaired or corrected?
No, so there's, the way, the field was actually integrated as part of the design of Carriage Hill, so it was part and parcel of the whole thing. The water comes across Salfland, and that's, I believe, why it's not piped, because it wasn't their land, but then they own the land down the bottom. The field was part of Carriage Hill. It's supposed to be part of their thing. What happened is that we basically have interceptor drains, and what happened is one of the interceptors partly being clogged, partly because it became such a point source from the stream, it got eroded, and that ended up, so the interceptors actually got exposed, and then that led to basically an erosion coming down the hill. So we've put gravel in that before. We've just tried to like stabilize the slope, But the reality is that doesn't fix the problem because it's really the point source of like the stream hitting that spot that's causing the problem.
Thank you. I do have to say, this is a combined meeting where the Board of Selectmen are attending as well for their information. So, do you want to participate, the Board of Selectmen? Oh, sorry, I thought you did. I'll come back to you.
No questions at this point. We've been going to Mike, as you know. No questions at this point.
Okay, so are we done, or do you have
No,
important
I'm in the
questions?
middle of my question.
Okay, well then make the whole question in one question.
Well, I was being polite and letting someone answer it.
Good, go.
Okay, so do we need an engineer to look, the land in between Carriage Hill and the field is owned by SOF. It's not even our land. So we need permission from SOF to go on and do whatever work you want to do. What I don't want to do, what my issue here is, this has been an ongoing issue for a very long time. And at one point, it was a legal issue between SOF and Carriage Hill, and they didn't have the money to fight it. We still have this issue. We have all this damage being done to the field. It's no fault to recreation, but that drainage has to be fixed 100% before we can do any work on the field, because we're gonna be back here in 5 or 10 years from now with the same problem, with the same amount of money. And as a taxpayer, I don't think that that makes any sense. So I need to know that that drainage is going to be repaired 100%. It is going to work, and then do the work on the field. And that's me, that's how I feel, but I want to guarantee that you can fix it, and we have permission to go on the land with SOF.
So we shouldn't have to go onto the SOF's land. It's coming through SOF's land as a stream. So unless SOF decides to fill in their stream, which they can't do because I'm sure with wetlands things would cause it, or conservation would stop that. But as long as SOF continues what they're doing on their land, which is not actually dealing with that water, then we can absolutely intercept it in our section and put it where we need it to be.
But it's still erosion.
It won't be erosion, because at that point, we're actually intercepting it. We're intercepting a stream and putting it into piping, which is done other spots in town. It's the fact that it was coming down, the change in grade at the slope is what created the actual problem with our interceptor. So we don't actually have to go onto SOF's land to do any of the work.
You don't have to pipe up the hill?
No, because we don't want to pipe the stream all the way from Carriage Hill.
Right.
That wasn't the design. That's not something that we would really even need to do, because it's coming in a stream. We're
Okay.
getting it in a point source.
So I think you
I
answered
don't-
the question.
I just want to add, I don't want to speak for Southborough Open Land Foundation, just in case folks don't know what SELF is, but they actually had representation at our public forum, and it was a very positive discussion. Again, I will just say that we received, I believe, positive feedback for this particular project.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'm going to move that we reconsider the vote on Article 18. Second?
Second.
Those in
Right.
favor of reconsidering our previous vote on Article 18, which was not supporting it? We have to decide whether we are willing to
I didn't mean
reconsider.
to ask for that. I was just bringing up,
Article 18 is landlocked.
I wasn't, no, Calander was part of Article 16, and I was just providing that more as informational because.
I'm moving on Article
Okay.
18 because I want to get to it.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you said you had nothing to say on it.
No, I have nothing more to
So
say
we
on
got
Lundblad.
totally disorganized.
Okay, sorry.
But we're back,
think Calander
we're
would
back
go
on
into the next
18.
thing.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And I calling for a vote. I move that we reconsider our previous vote on Article 18, where we did not support it. I had a second. Those in favor, those who support that we reconsider the vote. 1. Those against it?
Wait, I'm sorry, which?
You get,
1 to 8.
is not supported. So I do want to say, Kirsten, Kristen, again,
Yeah.
we're back at the fundamentals,
Okay.
hasn't changed for us, regarding the effect that this has on the tax impact and everything else, and in light of all the other capital projects that were really just shelved. And that is the feedback that we have. It is not necessarily against the projects, but it is, there's just not, we didn't accommodate anything in that light, and I don't think so you get the message.
No,
That's the
it's
reason.
crystal clear, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
We done?
Yeah, I don't think I want to get into a battle. I do want to go on record as far as one situation is concerned. At the Board of Selectmen and moderator meeting that we had on March 20th, I want to go on record that Mr. Stivers did not consult with me as chair regarding making a presentation regarding Article 32. I think he could have done that because I sat there not being aware of what he was doing. Secondly, he stated that I supported the article, and I did not. I abstained from it. And I just plead and ask for the members that that we have improved cooperation, and that we communicate with each other, and that we can show one face, even if it's disagreement. And that's all I have to say about that. That's my piece of the chair report. And
Can I respond to that?
yes, you can.
I apologize that I misremembered your position on that, but I also believe that it's appropriate for any member who has a dissenting opinion on an article to be able to make that presentation or make those comments at town meeting, and that has been done over the years consistently.
Absolutely agree with you. I have no issue with it. I just think that we can communicate with each other as to when we get at a forum where I did not want to get into a battle or whether I voted for it or not voted for it. If there was any discussion before the time, it just helps that you said you wanted to get up and talk about it. You could have informed me. And at least I had a question from the Board of Selectmen as to, what do you say, Mr. Peters? And I went like, hello, okay, where do we go from here? And I'm just asking that we have better protocol in the future. Thank you. That's my chair report, and I think we're done.
How about the annual report that you distributed last night? I think there's some pretty significant problems with it, and I think we ought to discuss it.
You're welcome. Everybody saw the report, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I've got to go. I've got to get back to tax returns, but there are several things that need to be fixed. There's some factual things, and there's some
Okay, let me
substantive
just
things.
get my copy, please, if you don't mind.
Mr. Chairman, very quick moment.
Yes, sir.
The Board of Selectmen's meeting, we're going to continue our meeting down in Mr. Purple's office. Doors open, all are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for,
Thank you.
welcome. Okay, so the only item outstanding, if I can say so, would be then the report to the town meeting, and open for discussion.
I guess I have a number of comments here on this, and unfortunately, just got it last night, so I haven't had a chance to go through and edit in detail. And I'm unfortunately tight on time this week to do that, but I think I'm concerned about several things here. One is that I think there needs to be more explanation at the front end for town meeting attendees who may not be familiar with advisory committee. And I think that the prior year's versions had some verbiage that talked about committee, what it does, et cetera, in a more complete way than the current draft of the report. And I would urge us to consider adding some of that prior text back in here. One of the things that, that we are required to do as part of the list of things on the draft report is to report on the transfers to from the reserve fund that we approved during the year. And we don't have that list in here, so at the very least we need to include that information to comply with the bylaw requirements. In other words, if you look at point B in your duties and authority on the next page, we're required to insert in the annual town report description of all transfers made from the reserve fund. And we've done that historically, and I think we need to include that here, certainly. We talk about in here, there's confusion in this between the tax increase and the budget increase, which are different concepts, and we need to be clear in terms of how we describe those. So we need to do some editing around that one. You talk in here about the let's see, the Town Finance Committee. There is no Town Finance Committee. There's a town, we've referred to it in the past as the finance team, several places in here in the third paragraph down. Prior years we referred to it as the finance team. What I would suggest, if we're going to talk about it as we've done previously, we define it for people, and we talk about Mr. Purple, Mr. Ballantyne, Ms. Krieger, and others in the town staff, and we can define the term as the finance team or finance working group or whatever. But I think it's going to lead to confusion if we define a new committee. Yeah, it's not a committee actually. Good point. And a main issue that I have, I think that we need to look in here not only at the focus on the current budget, but I think part of our charge is to actually look to the future on a variety of things. And in the prior year's reports, we've had things that we think we need to watch for example, the ongoing pressure from the school budgets, and the ultimate pressure in terms of municipal budget flexibility there. We've gotten some good luck in terms of relief on the school side in the past several years, which is great, and they've done a great job at managing, but that's not guaranteed to continue. And for those of you who haven't been on the committee for a while, we had a series of runs about 10 years ago where the school budgets were going up close to 10% annually for several years, and that created huge pressure on the municipal side because we're limited overall with the Prop 2.5 caps. So I think we need to keep an eye open for those kinds of things. I think that, again, listing some of the issues that we've had in the past, one of the things that, again, Kathy mentioned earlier in the evening before she left was the overall capital budget expenditure view that we've taken that came up with the $20 million or so, or $40 million that we thought the town had the capacity to spend. I think keeping that concept highlighted is important, and I think that is the structure that we ought to use for describing the rec situation in here. I think this is a little too pejorative and pointed at the rec folks as far as their role in the process this year, and I think we can actually reframe that a little bit without making it quite so accusatory, which I read this as. I think just that's a much better way to deal with that particular language. And so if we set that context, I think then that it's a good piece of context for the town's voters to understand that we're looking at the big picture, the long-term pieces, and we expect all of the various departments and folks who are proposing budgets to keep that in mind as they consider particularly capital expenditures here. I think that as I look at other things from past years, I think an important thing to include is a recognition of the potential role for the new Municipal Technology Committee, which just got finally off the ground and will have a few things to say at this town meeting. I think that's a great opportunity for a better look, would bring more expertise to technology expenditures, maybe finding more efficient ways to do things. And I believe that it's well worthwhile for us to be supportive of them and to recognize that in this report. I continue to be in favor of keeping the spotlight on the Pine Hill water situation, and that public water is not available over there. I think many people have commented over the years that's a public safety risk, And not an easy fix, not a cheap fix, but I think that it bears continued attention. We ought to keep looking at that, trying to figure out ways to deal with that, which has been a long-running issue, certainly. And I think there are a few wordsmithing things I'd do. I wouldn't, for example, talk about drastic deferrals of capital items. I mean, we've made significant deferrals there, but I guess I don't view them as drastic. I think there are a few typos lurking in here. I'd also suggest that we continue the process in prior years of thanking members who have departed from the committee this year and welcoming new members. I think that's a nice thing to do, and I think we ought to continue to do that. So, you know, again, I don't necessarily disagree with what's here, but I think there needs to be more explanation for voters who aren't as familiar with the process as we are, as some of the longtime town meeting attendees are, because this is an educational document in some ways. I assume that we're planning to print this and distribute it as well as talk about it from the floor, which is what we've done in the past. I think it's good reading material for people, and there are down times in the meeting when people can actually read this stuff. So I think it's a good communication vehicle. So I guess given the short time here, I think we've got a real issue in terms of how we figure out what to do with it. We don't have another meeting planned before then. If we're actually going to print and distribute, we got to do it. I would urge us, particularly the chairman, to get this out earlier next time in terms of being able to provide input in a way that we can discuss and then get back and have an agreement on, sort of like meeting minutes. Now there's not a lot of time to do this.
I will respond.
So,
Number one, I sent an email to all the committee members to tell me what they want to include.
and I responded.
I got about very late, I think it's a couple of days ago, we're not going to argue about it, I got from you 4 headers. You could have sent me your previous report that you referred to so that I could see it.
You asked for headers, I sent you headers.
I know, okay, that's fine, thank you, Mr. Stivers. I took a different approach, I just want to share it with the committee. Based on what I looked at, I was looking at something that is short and sweet, short, that as short as possible, possibly on 1 page, so that the people would actually read it. What is important to the voters when they come to the meeting? What is important for us that we can put out where they can focus and see what the issues were this year? I do not disagree with some of the things you said, but it's very important to make it as short as possible. People today do not read 5, 8 pages. They just don't. And that's where getting to reach the voters, getting them to pick up a piece of paper that not some would read, but that most of them should read. Getting it short, to the point, what are the issues, what did we face? This year it was difficult. And I think that would be the main issue. I even hesitated to put in page number 2 as far as what are the duties of the advisory committee. I did that because you gave me the header, but even that is, everybody knows what it is. It's in the code. They can find it there. If they don't know what the role of advisory is, I gotta say I don't know. So I think personally that adding a lot of stuff to this, which people know, should know, and that is not material to the town meeting, should not be, people are not gonna read it. And so even if we were to add some, I would still focus on what is important. I actually did discuss this report with a few people, even people that I thought could give me good advice to make this short and sweet and to the point. As far as the typo errors are concerned, I think Judy will have to answer to that because she edited it for me. I actually
Maybe throw her under the bus for that.
I did get some advice. So, okay, so there was some work that went into it. I could tell you, I started with 2 years ago report, and I looked at it and I tried to rework it, and I went like, what am I doing here? So I went from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. Eventually I said, let me just rewrite this and see whether I can get the crux of the matter on one page. If there's legal stuff we still have to add, I'm okay for it. But everything else, the people have seen, they know it. I don't think the voters who come to the town meeting are interested in the stuff that is de facto.
Can I give a little bit of feedback?
Sure.
When I looked at this, and I've been on advisory for 8 years now, I would like to see a little bit more of a snapshot of this is where we are now, this is what the financial status of the town and forecast is going forward. So what I get most of here is a synopsis of what advisory went through this year in our process. And I don't think we need even one whole page of that. What I don't really see is our forecast going forward, kind of what Kathy referred to, what she and John Butler had done before. This is where we are financially. This is the challenges we're up against. This is why we made the decisions that we made. It doesn't need to be put in narrative form, but this is why we had to rein in things. This is why we made the hard decisions that we made. That is something that can be covered in a sentence or two. Going through all the agita about the rec articles when we don't necessarily go into detail about what we did with youth and family services or other cuts. I don't think we need to get into the weeds like that. What this needs to do, or should do in my mind, is give an overall picture of the financial status of the town. And I didn't come away from that with this. Just, I agree with you. I don't think that we need to go over the mission statement for the advisory committee. As far as, I think what Sam went over, as far as new members, retiring members is a nice thing. As far as signing off, I think just list the members underneath the chair's name. And this is just a formality, or a formatting thing. The current membership and listing the names, I would just list it as it has been in the past.
Can I make a comment? Some of the things you raised, such as the future and what is in for us in the future, I cannot see how we never discussed it. We never worked through it. We do not have supported documentation for it that's current.
So I think
That's an issue.
Well, I think that's the lack of longevity for a lot of the people, including yourself, on this committee.
Absolutely.
So I think Sam, Kathy, myself, some others have that longevity and understanding that who were on the committee when those things were reviewed, were studied. So, maybe reaching out to the people that were here that do have the experience, because to say that it hasn't been looked at is certainly very wrong. You just weren't on the committee when it was done. So I think it is.
I think your point is very valid, Karen, in the sense that this should be done going forward. What was done is the only firm figures we have are the ones that was done by Brian Ballantyne and Mark, where they looked at the levies, looked at the ceilings, et cetera, et cetera. We do not have a proper capital plan going forward, and I cannot sign something where we say stuff that we cannot support. If anybody in the town gets up and say, can you share with us the documentation of what you are saying? We don't have it. And it was done way back with John Butler, who was here tonight. I worked that through with him.
3 years.
I did work through that with him.
It's 3 years old.
It's not updated. and it's a complicated issue. We need to tackle it from scratch. I think it's irresponsible to give a report on the future, as you say, which should be done. We cannot back it. Not in hard figures. Not in hard figures, we can't.
Oh, may I ask a question? Sure. So the first sentence itself says this is a report on our annual budget review process. So when I read it, I assumed it was for this year. Is that not the case? Is that not the report we're presenting? So I'm slightly unclear on why we need to go back 3 years or 5 years. So I'm asking that question.
I'm not saying going back, give a financial status report of the town is what we've always done.
And again, I've always thought that, at least as I was a town meeting member before I was on the advisory committee, I would typically be very interested in advisory's view of not only the current stuff, but what's going on longer term, how we should think about these decisions that we're being asked to make with town meeting. And I think you need to understand some of where we've been and where we're going to make an informed decision about how much we should spend on project X, Y, or Z here. And so at least I think that many voters find that a helpful piece of context.
Mr. Stivers, if you can give me any figures that relates to the future without having a capital budget, with serious lacks of a model that has been reworked, there is no way. If anybody says, show me the model that you are quoting on when you say 20, whatever it is,
40,
we have
40
capacity.
million, yeah.
It is, I don't know who can show it. I worked that through with Mr. Butler, and it is not really possible. So I think if anybody on this committee can give me hard figures to say this is what we see coming, let me have it, because I'm going to need proof for it. I tried my best to focus in this report, and I do not have an issue adding stuff that are legally required. I focused in this report on the stuff that we did, that we covered, and I think we can substantiate and that we can support. The rest of it, I call blah, because what is it that we are really doing? Are we going to tell the town we cannot afford to do certain things because we do not have a model? We do not have a capital budget. I think next year would be totally different. That's my take on it, and I would do my best next year to make sure that we can do as much as we can.
So Adrian, as the chair, if you choose not to give a financial assessment of where the town is, with the studies and with the assessments that have been done in the near recent past, and you just want to go over what we did this year, that's your prerogative. I personally think that we do have recent information, that we do have capital budget plans from different department heads, and that the citizens of the town, that, as Sam said, that information is helpful, and that is information that should be in our report. But absolutely, as the chair, if you choose not to do that and you just want to give a 1-page or 1.5-page review of what we did in the budget process and talk about the Board of Selectmen and such, then, that's your choice.
Except we do have an option of voting to support this report or not, potentially, although I don't want to be confrontational about it. But the point, I think, is that I agree with you, Adrian, that we don't have hard data on this, but we do have data, and we're never going to have data. I mean, in my business, I never have perfect data. I think we have an obligation to give the best information we have with the appropriate caveats to say, here was the analysis that was done 3 years ago. It said this. Things may have changed since then. Here's what we are hearing from the departments. Again, we don't have full confirmation of all these numbers, but this is the best information we have, and providing that to the voters, I think, is part of our job to make sure that they know as much as we do about this. And frankly, if we do a big capital budget project next year, I don't think that's going to be perfect information that we can all prove and guarantee 100% that it's going to happen. Not that we shouldn't do it, not that it won't be better information than we have now, but I think we owe it to the voters to give them the full context in terms of information that we have available to us, so they can consider that as they make decisions as they vote at town meeting. And I don't think we're doing that here.
Yeah, I do not have. I mean, and I could tell you, I did a lot of work this year. I think I am on the same page. I think I know what the budgets could have been. I worked closely with the town administration. I consulted with many of the committees. I went to their meetings, some of them, not all of them. I spoke to chairs. There is no way that I can stand up and, in all honesty, say, this is what is coming and this is what's not coming. We have an example here of recreation where we know, I was at their meeting where I asked us to come in. We're looking at $10 million. How do I speak to it? How do I possibly speak to it? I can't speak to it.
Well, nobody's asking you to.
Adrian, may I?
Yeah.
I just wanted...
I appreciate there's a philosophical discussion here. I have some concrete observations and proposed wording changes. And if you think that would be helpful, I'm happy to walk through it.
Absolutely. I would take any suggestion.
I would also like to say that whatever we do is going to be imperfect. And I appreciate the comments and the objective of doing better and providing a more comprehensive report that's useful. To me, unless we're prepared to make real recommendations and come to the process with some language, perhaps we can focus first on the edits and what have you that maybe we can make adjustments for here this evening, and then if others wish to propose, I'm open to seeing what they have and, you know, considering and so on there. So, if I may, in the second paragraph, I think...
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Before you go to the detail. I am open to anything that legally should be included here, or anything that we can substantiate. And I would say, not perfect, but 80–90%. So what I suggest, Frank, is I would circulate, I'm not sure whether I circulated, what version did I circulate?
It was a PDF.
Oh, I will circulate the Word version to everybody, if that was a PDF.
So my only concern there is...
And I would take the edits, and anything
I
that
think we may have some open meeting issues if we're...
I think we can do that if we all send it to Adrian.
Yep.
And maybe to you as secretary, Frank. Then
I defer to those who...
Yeah, just...
not copy everything.
We can't edit that way, that's impossible.
I'm sure that for me to take edits on the report, I'm sure I can take it.
It's absolutely gonna be nutty, that's a technical term, to try to edit from everybody's feedback. I live this world, it's no good that way. Wait.
I don't think anyone's proposing that.
No, I think that's where it's going.
I will work on it.
Sam, no one reads, we could write 10 pages, I'll read the first page. I think that Adrian's right. This is almost too long, in my view. I have to tell you that when I sent the edit, which was very small, I pumped up the rec stuff. So I take responsibility for that. I think Sam, if you send the highlights of what you said should be in here, if Frank just gives me what looks like word changes, minor stuff, let's go with what we have. It's getting too late. Let's not build this into a massive paper that people will not read. And send it to Adrian. He'll, I'm sure, send it to me. I'm not in charge of proofreading because I've been reading student papers for 45 years, and nothing is wrong anymore. Everything is right, nothing is right. I can't catch anything. But let's not get into something where everybody's got a version of this because it can't work. Thank you. So if you guys send us something that looks like this, And Sam, please define tax and budgeting. You made a statement about tax versus budget.
tax
Don't
changes
do
and
it
budget
now.
changes,
Don't,
okay.
write it down.
If you could just do that.
And you send it to Adrian. Adrian will mess with it. He'll send it to me, and it will be nice. And then I'll send it to somebody else who can do the proofreading, one of you.
Yep.
And that's it. And it's 9:45.
Okay.
What do you want?
I'm just saying, I will take any edits, and I will take anything that is legally still has to come in, and Sam made one good point. No, I mean, that specific point.
First
Sorry,
one,
Sam,
first one,
sorry,
first one
sorry,
this
sorry.
year. Amazing.
No,
Which one was it?
the one point that on the legal side, it's not a discussion, that's what I'm saying. We can't debate it. And I have to, Sam is a very special character, and we have to, I appreciate it.
You're a special character.
I appreciate that.
I think it's like the
So-
Special Olympics.
Yes. So what we will do is send me what, I'm open-minded to take something that I can format, that we can substantiate, and to Judy's point and to Frank's point, I will take anything. I will work on it. And so, based on that, I would suggest that we support, if you guys are okay with it, I will work on it, and I will recirculate it.
Adrian, do you read this at the meeting, or is it just a handout at the door in
I
a
can tell you what's gonna
sea of paper?
No, this will be published as soon as I finalize it, it'll go onto the website together with the warrant articles. And anything else, it'll go on there.
Are we not going to duplicate it and hand it out at the table out front, which we normally do?
We could. I asked Mark to print it for us and hand it out.
Okay. And I think that's useful for some people at least.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, I agree. So it will go to both places. And I think where we have the opportunity, I would call on the vote, on the people at the town meeting to make sure that they look at it.
Why is it not in here? Every other committee has something in there.
I can just tell you, I asked some previous chairs whether they did, some of them said to me they didn't do reports, number one. I couldn't find a single record in the town of any previous reports. There's not a record in this town hall or anywhere else of a previous advisory annual report.
Well, we've done it
Zero.
for at least 6 years, 7
Yeah,
years.
I'm just saying to you,
Yeah.
no records.
Yeah, but in fact, the reason, Dorian, it's not in that book is that that book publication deadline is long before advisory is ready to opine on what's going on with the budget process, so the timing simply doesn't work with getting our report in that book, and historically, advisory has presented comments and a report at town meeting, at the time of town meeting, since things tend to change up to that point.
Okay, I do want to make another.
That's one of the reasons I've repeatedly asked for documents, to be able to put them up on the website, to have them with the agendas, so that our residents and members of town meeting and such would have access to documents and reports like that.
I can share with you that I did talk to Mark, and we, next year, to include it in the warrant, that it will go into the budget booklet and into the budget of the town. It will not be a separate report.
This one?
We will include it, absolutely. It will go in at the front from us. And so, because this is, it's loose, it's nowhere, it's too wide in some senses, as we discussed, is to try and get better focus to the pieces that goes to town, and it's gonna be included there. And whereas it's loose at this point in time, it's my wish that we could do it. And so far, I got a green light that we can do it next year. This year is too late. But it has to change. Okay, if everybody's okay with that, can we have, there's a motion to adjourn, Robbie?
I'll second.
Second, everybody, okay, we go home. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And